I'm a first-year Azrieli postdoc fellow in philosophy, and I currently am thinking about turning my dissertation into a book. So I have an acute interest in this discussion, of course. So let me just again introduce Dr. Andrea Gondos, who, as you heard already, works in Jewish studies at Free University Berlin, and she published very recently her monograph with SUNY Press. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Balthasar. Let me just say that I recently published my PhD dissertation, so it's a monograph from the PhD, but I'm also currently editing a book. And I've also edited a book in 2011 that was published. So I have had some experience with both editing a volume as well as writing my own monograph. And each one is slightly different. So I wrote out a few points for myself, and let me go through it. And if anything is not clear, then just please stop me, or we can discuss it afterwards. I will plunge right into it. So you have decided to publish your dissertation as a book. One of the first things to understand is that publishing your dissertation as a book is a very different or slightly different process than writing your dissertation. When you're writing your dissertation, you're essentially wanting to appeal to, and you're writing it to a committee, specialists in your field. You want to make sure that you cite all the appropriate literature. You want to make sure that you engage the discourses within your field of study. Your lens is a very narrow lens. When you move into book publishing, you have to take the lens back a little bit. All of a sudden, you're publishing to a much broader audience, and therefore you need to engage larger discourses. You have to fit yourself into a larger conversation within your field or within society. You want to appeal to a broader readership. Recently, or I think it was last year, at one of the Association of Jewish Studies meetings, there was a wonderful session on book publishing, and one of the editors made a very poignant statement. She said, "When you send me a book proposal, I want to get the cake and not the ingredients. I'm not interested about the ingredients. I'm interested about the cake. Give me the cake." So this is something you need to keep in mind when you're sending proposals out and as you're turning your dissertation into a book. Many of the editors, especially the North American editors, especially editors of larger publishing houses, they want to get the cake. They want to have an interesting story. They want to have an interesting narrative. They don't want all the names necessarily. The names will get transferred into your footnotes, but they want a smooth, an interesting story. You always want to give them a story. You want to package it as a story. What is interesting in your dissertation? Ask yourself, what is the topic? What is the theme that will appeal to a broader audience? Ask yourself that question before you sit down to write your proposal, because that's what you will need to put into your proposal in as clear and interesting a language as you can. So keep that in mind. Aim high. Compile an A and a B list of publishers. A list publishers contain or comprise publishers such as Oxford, Cambridge, University of Pennsylvania Press, Stanford University Press, Harvard, Yale. And then have a B or a C list of publishers that you would ideally want to target. One of the things to keep in mind that the A-list publishers you will most likely not get in the first round. So for your first book, you will most likely not get to the A publishers because they are not interested as much in authors who are coming out of a dissertation. They usually want to publish authors who are writing their second book. That has been my experience. Nevertheless, if you have an interesting story, target the A publishers. It's a letter that you sent out, once you put your proposal together, you may as well send it to them as well. Who knows? You might be lucky, and maybe your story is so interesting that they may say, yes, we want this book, we want this proposal. But just be prepared. And it's a very good idea to immediately send out, once your proposal is together, and I will talk about the proposal in a moment, send it out to as many publishers as possible. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up 10, just send it out. And then you'll see who will write back, who will express interest. One of the things that you will find, I had, for example, when I sent out my proposal, Oxford University Press was interested, but then they wanted a longer proposal with chapters. And once they saw that, they felt it was too specialized for them. So they moved away from the proposal itself. So you might find that there might be an initial interest, which is followed up by thank you, but no thank you. So it's a very emotionally draining process. Be prepared for it and have a tough skin. You have to keep going. You will find a publisher, you will find a home, but you'll just have to, it has to be right for you, and you have to be right for them. So just keep going, and don't be afraid, and don't get bogged down if you get rejections. Keep going to the next one. Do your homework. And this is a very, very important phase. Do your homework and research to see which publisher publishes in your field. Look also for series. So many publishers have specific series, and look for those series. When you're writing your dissertation, you will come across books that are obviously relevant to your work. Where have those books been published? Which publishing houses? Have any of those been published as part of a series? Again, taking it back to my experience, I gave a talk at Association of Jewish Studies last year. The new editors, there's a new series in my field is Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. There's now a new series in Kabbalah at Stanford University Press. The editor happened to be there listening to my talk. He followed up with me and he said, we're very interested at the press in once you have your book together from this new research material that I've been working on for the last 2 years, send it to us. We're super interested in it. So it was just, I happened to give a talk. You never know who sits at your talks. You never know how things work out. Go to conferences, very important to participate in conferences, and very, very important to bring your work to scholarly audiences at different venues, in different places. But look also for series. So this is a new series at Stanford University Press, but there are long-standing series at presses. So look to see and check who the editor is for a particular series. Write to the editor, and that's also a great way of finding a home for your work. So again, just going back to publishing houses and topics, every publisher has a slightly different interest. So some publishers are interested in cultural studies. Some publishers publish in history. Some publishers have a lot of a wide breadth in terms of religious titles, anthropology. So again, do your homework, do your research, and look at what a particular publisher tends to publish in. And that really will help you narrow down the publishing houses that you will want to contact at the beginning. I already mentioned go to major conferences. One of the interesting aspects of conferences that there are always book exhibits, and often, especially at Association of Jewish Studies, major editors do come to these conferences, the larger conferences, and you actually get a chance to make an appointment with them. You should write to them in advance of the conference, make an appointment, and bring your proposal, and bring it may be a 5-minute meeting, but bring your pitch. What are you working on? What is your book about? What are some of the main methodological foci of your work? What's the topic? And present it in a very convincing way. And so the editor immediately will let you know, yes, this is something of interest to us, or no, this is not. And if it is, then you can follow up. This way, the editor already has a face to put with the project itself, and follow up. Don't wait too long after the conference. If interest was expressed, then follow up with the editor. Don't use too much. So let me just go into the proposal and the process itself. So there are guidelines. Every publishing house has a guideline. You can look that up. You usually find this information under authors information. You click on that, and each publisher usually tells you what they want. Normally, what you're expected to give as part of the proposal is usually a 5-page synopsis of your book. Usually, they want you to detail whom it is targeting. What are the comparable titles in the field? What will be the length of your manuscript? And what is the expected timeline? So when are you going to finish it? This is the proposal. You send this in, and they may want to see after this, especially if there's interest, they may want to see an introduction and several chapters. Or they may come back to you and say, we're interested, but we want to see the entire manuscript. Usually when you're a first-time author, they expect this. You will not, most of the time, you will not get a contract, especially with the American publishers. And Flavio may, actually, we discussed this, that Flavio will discuss the difference between European and American publishers, because maybe European publishers will give you a contract immediately. But my experience with American publishers is that you don't get a contract immediately. You will have to send in the entire manuscript, and only after they send it out to peer review will you get a contract. So another thing to keep in mind at this stage is some publishers allow you to give your proposal to another publisher, but some do not. So make sure that you respect that. With me, SUNY they stipulated, and they were very clear on this, that they did not want multiple submissions. So if I'm going to go through the process with them, they do not want me to also market my proposal with another publisher. Make sure that you respect this, because there could be complications. So it's best to wait it out. It's a long process, but it's best to just then go with one publisher and wait out the process as long as it takes. Evaluation usually takes 2 to 4 months. It can be more than that. In my case, with one of the publishers, it was 5 to 6 months. There was a transition at the publishing house, so that took longer. With the other publisher, with SUNY, it was actually 2 months. So it was very quick. You're going to they usually send it out to 2 reviewers. And if both reviewers are positive, then you probably get a contract at that point. If one of the reviewers is positive, the other one is negative, often they send it out to a third reviewer. And so that's going to make the process longer. It's a long process. You have to be very patient, and you have to kind of stick with it, because that's how the publishing game works. You can always suggest reviewers to the publishing house. So you can say, you can give a list of names, 2 to 3 names or 3 to 4 names, who know your work and are sympathetic toward your work. You can also tell the publisher if there's 1 or maximum 2 people whom you do not want the publisher to send it out to. That also happens. There might be somebody in the field whom you know from conferences who is not sympathetic toward your paradigm, the methodological paradigm, or the topic, or the way you approach it. And you can tell the publisher, please do not send to this person. So that's completely fine. If you do not hear from the publisher within 2 to 4 months, you can immediately ask them to update you where things are with your manuscript. They're very busy. Publishers get a lot of proposals and a lot of publications. You have to help. You have to keep on top of your own proposal, because it's your time, and especially when you're just after your PhD, you're trying to get a job. it's very important to get the book out as soon as possible. And time is something that you need to worry about. The publisher will not worry about your time frame. So that's also important to keep in mind. So let's say it went out to the reviewers, both of the reviewers are positive or one of them may be negative, you get comments back. Sometimes it's a very short review, and sometimes, as in my case, there were longer reviews. They're extremely helpful. Take it very seriously. Go one by one, address every single point that a reviewer makes. Once you make the revisions, you then have to compile a document to the publisher addressing each of the points. So it doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything that a reviewer says, but you do have to address it. So if you don't agree with a particular point, write it down. I have a different, I differ from this reviewer and why. So you have to justify why. Or you can say, I took that into consideration. Please find it on this and this page of my manuscript. This is where I took care of it. So, but be very careful about this, that you do need to address every single point in a careful manner so once you have reviewed these recommendations, and you have to write up this document to the editor, because the editor takes that into account. They read these very carefully, and they often send this back to the reviewer. So, and usually after this process, once you submit the full manuscript, then usually it takes about 8 to 12 months for the book to come out. So I think in a nutshell, that's where I'm going to wrap up. And then, of course, I will be happy to answer any question that comes up.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrea. That was super helpful. And now Flavio will speak for 10 minutes, and then we have 15 minutes.
Excellent. Excellent. All righty. Thank you, guys, for being here. Thank you, Balthasar,
go ahead.
For inviting me. You wanted to introduce me. I'm not that. You feel free to introduce me.
No, you can just go ahead.
Good. Anyway, I talk. This is basically a monologue, and it's very autobiographical. So you'll get to know me like this. I'm not yet in the mezzo della mia vita, like Professor Bendov, but maybe the inizio of the mezzo, right? The beginning of the middle part of my life. And so I'm happy to share whatever I have to offer at this point. I basically thought I would complement Andrea's wonderful and very systematic overview here by giving a little bit more of a subjective account of my own experience, so that you see a little bit the vicissitudes of these adventures. So apart from being kind of an entertaining story that has many turns and twists, I'm also trying to abstract a couple of points. I think I came up with 9 points that we could call lessons that served me quite well. So personally, I found this transition from dissertation into book quite stressful, complicated, difficult. And so what I did was I bought pretty much any book I could find on Amazon about this topic, right? And so going on to this meta level, reading about how to convert a dissertation into a book was really the first important step to do. How do I become a published author? And it was key to my success ultimately. And so the first lesson I would say is, in order to publish a book, we need to change our way of thinking, right? It's our way of writing, our way of relating to existing scholarships, our way of presenting ourselves. And ultimately, I would say that getting a book published is in many ways a psychological transformation. And as we all know, humans in general do not like to change, right? It's not something that we enjoy very much. So it's a job, right? But on many levels, it's a psychological job. We'll come to talk about this more. And so as a brief overview and introduction, maybe, so I'm a historian of religion, and I wrote 2 PhDs, one in the US and one in Europe. And one in Switzerland about Italian philosophy mainly, and one in the United States about the Indo-Tibetan religions, you could say. And so let's start with the project on Italy that I wrote with a Swiss university. And so as I finished it, it was a massive thing. It was like 1,000 pages long. It was 2 parts of like 500 pages. And the first part was pretty much a book. I intended it like a book and it cohered like a book. And so I asked my advisors, both in the US and in Europe, how should I publish this? And the Europeans said, well, Flavio, send this to Brill or the Gruyter or one of these European academic presses, and they will eat it up. It's a great book, it's a great project, and they do not care if it's 500 pages long. They will publish it. Whereas in the US, they told me, no, Flavio, you should rewrite this, invest another year of your time, and make it more concentrated. It has to be like around 80,000 words. You know, like we're talking about a significant shortening. And so what did I do? I'll come to that in a second. So basically the lesson here, there's two lessons here. Number one is know the press, right? Figure out the difference between academic press, between a university press, between what are they called, trade press, etc., right? And I would really talk to people in your field, and I would just look at the books that you like best, the most important books in your field, and see who published them and send it to them. That's how I would go about it. And then the second thing here to learn, which is lesson number 3, be aware of the timing, right? How much time are you willing to invest into rewriting something? And like Andrea beautifully said, university presses almost very, very rarely take a dissertation if it is not significantly overhauled, right? So anyway, what did I decide to do? I said, I'm going to rewrite it. So I like challenges. And secretly, I was a little bit selfish because I knew I had 2 or 3 books in this one dissertation, and I didn't want to give it away too cheaply. So I told them, I'm going to give you one part, and then the rest I keep for later and make a couple more books out of it. So I shortened this thing, put it into 200 pages, really neat and nice, wonderful proposal, etc. Sent it to all the university presses. What happened? They all turned me down. They said, no, Flavio, no. So then I moved on and I went to Brill, like the first advice already was, and they were extremely excited about it. And the book was then ultimately published by Newman. Like it's in Brill, but within a series called the Newman. You can see it online. The Newman Religion series. So it found actually a very prestigious and very good home because actually my figure grew out of this type of movement as well. So anyway, this might be a supplement to lesson number 2. Do not only know the presses, but also know the series. And I think Andrea also mentioned that. Ultimately, this book, which is tiny, as you can see at the end, costs 100 euros to buy. What the heck? That's a big advantage of the university presses. They're much more accessible. So lesson number 4, availability and cost. I would definitely keep this in the back of my mind. Ultimately, I found a really nice solution here. I wrote a grant application to the Swiss National Science Foundation and asked them to publish it or to pay for the publication cost. It's now open access and there for free. So even better. Now let's move on to the second PhD. That's kind of the first half. The second half, I basically finished the second PhD while I was rewriting the other book. And here I'm writing about a very secretive meditation practice of yogis staring into the sky for extended periods of time. I wrote the proposal just as I did before. I sent it to the university presses. And what happened? They ate it up. Everybody wanted it. Everybody wanted it. They were very excited about it. All the big presses were excited about it. And so lesson number 5, marketability, right? The difference between this obscure Italian figure, 20th century thought, intellectual history, and the meditation book is that one is, it meets a certain market. And so that's very important to know. Editors think differently than universities do. Unfortunately, and in a way, Professor Ben-Dov was hinting at that maybe universities themselves have to start thinking in a more on economic terms, in terms of how do we sell our product? What's the relevance of what we're doing here? Anyway, so that's that. And for the people that are actually writing their PhD now, that would definitely be an advice that I have for you guys. Think ahead. So I got many different options, and out of these options, I liked Oxford University Press the best because they were very enthusiastic about it and they immediately responded, and that just gives you a good feeling, you know? And so I sent the manuscript and waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited for 9 months. And after 9 months, I get 2 answers. One answer is very enthusiastic and says this has to be published. And the other answer is like basically a sentence, I wouldn't publish. So the editor said, yeah, I don't think that the negative reader even read this thing, but I cannot give you a contract like this. We need a tiebreaker. We need a third opinion. So I said, that's great, let's do it. in the meantime, while I was waiting for that review, which lasted another half a year, I contacted the guy who was turning me down. So this is a double-blind peer review, right? You never know officially who is reading your stuff, but you can read between the lines and figure out who these people are. And so what did I do? I sent this very established scholar in my field an email and introduced myself again. He already knew me before, but I engaged him, and I engaged him over like a half a year repeatedly, over and over, and just kind of sought the exchange, sought the contact. And in a way, I built a relationship, right? My message, like implicitly at least, my message is, you might not have liked what I write, but I'm here to stay. And I'm happy to establish a dialogue and a conversation and to learn from you, right? And that goes a long way. So that's lesson number 6, networking and being proactive, being assertive about your place in academia. It's key. It's part of that psychological transition, I would say. Because ultimately, the people that we meet at conferences are the ones reviewing our books. And so this is not as objective a process as the presses would like it to be. It really isn't. It's all about people. That's my sense, at least. So that's this. Then I got the third review, right? Third review, and the third review is positive. Said this and this and this needs to be changed, but overall we like it, and I would like to have it published. I think it said something like, this has to be published. It's a great contribution to our field. What does the editor do? And there's a twist in the story here. She says, no, we will wait. We will wait until you make the revisions, and then we'll talk about the contract. So that's maybe lesson number 7. Gatekeeping is a constant thing, and you kind of just need to gradually push against it. There is a position of dependency and precarity that we're in, but we cannot, in a way, you need to navigate this very subtly. And so what did I decide to do? I decided, number 1, that I want to go with Oxford. I want to continue this process. Number 2, the reviews were very good. The revisions that I had to make were very good, and my book will become better. And number 3, I decided to invest another half a year, 9 months, into rewriting the manuscript and making it even better so that they cannot reject me the next time, okay? And so that's, in a way, lesson number 8. Find agency within this very difficult system of being dependent and being precarious. Find agency and ask yourself, what do I want to do with my time? What do I want to create? What do I want to write? And this is part of the psychological dimension of this process, right? There needs to be a mixture between flexibility, dialogue, openness, and arrogance, confidence, right? And this needs to be learned over time, I would say. Anyway, I'm coming to my close here, because just like about 2 weeks ago, I wrote this editor and I said, hey, I'm almost done. I worked on it for 9 months. I did a lot of things. I'm really ready to go. And then I got an automated message that said, I'm retired. So another nice little quiz. So lesson number 9, have humor in all of this. And, don't take it all that seriously. At the end of the day, don't forget to laugh. So for now, I'm finishing the revisions. I'm sending it out. And the editor seems to be nice, the new one as well. So for those of you who want to hear more about, or the sequel in a way to this tragedy or drama or comedy or whatever it is, contact me next year and we'll talk. And for those of you who have kind of been inspired by my own story, I would encourage you to read a much better starting point. This is amateur stuff that I did here. It's very subjective and personal. I would read a book, okay? The book is called From Dissertation to Book by a guy called William Germano. It's the Bible. It's the Bible of this process, in my estimation. Read this and follow it step for step, and you'll be fine. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Andrea and Flavio, for sharing your insights and experiences. And now the idea really is to open a discussion and to share your, there are some participants here who have their own experiences already, and I invite everyone just to ask questions, to share their own experiences. So please go ahead.
I'd like to say something, Balthasar. I found the remarks very interesting, and in the end, I was impressed that Flavio was saying it's all about people. And I think that there's something here which is important to keep in mind. Neither of them mentioned something which I think is very important. When I'm looking at Noy Shemesh, I'm looking at Moishi Chichik and at Moti Levi, people whom I know and I've met. I think if one of their teachers, who is well known and is published in place X or Y, is willing to write and say to that publisher, Noy's book is very important, very relevant. Moishi's book is very important. Moti's book is very important. I'm not speaking now about this realm of between dissertation and the book, which is, of course, a very significant area. When I think back of different things that I've published in different places, at a certain point, the fact that somebody else said to person X or Y, take a look at this book. It's important. It was very significant. And I think in the different areas that the people who are in this group are, I am sure that you have a person or two people who are willing to go to bat for you and to say to that publisher, think of this person. And then that does open the door. And the door is important. It won't necessarily guarantee that the book will be published, but it does open the door. And then you can think of all the different things that Andrea and Flavio mentioned, which are important, of course. But I think one should always remember that there's this other element to All About People. If somebody has written a very good book, and you know that this person is putting himself out for this other person, it makes a difference. And I suggest that you keep that in mind.
That's a super helpful comment. So on a very practical level, the idea is if you send out a proposal to have another person, maybe like sending a letter of recommendation to the editor is
that could make a difference sometimes. I think it's very important. I can say that I heard of an editor. Somebody mentioned to the editor, take a look at this person. And the process was a process, but at least the door was opened in different places. And I think that having sat myself on various committees, in University of Pennsylvania Press, and in other presses where I've been asked to read books, it's always clear that somebody has sent the book to this press because somebody thought that this press would be interested in that book. And I was in one situation, a very interesting one, which I would just mention, that it was clear that the publisher did not think originally that this book was something that they wanted to publish. And yet they asked me to read the book for them. And it was clear to me that this was something which they should take into serious consideration. I don't know what's happened with that particular book at the moment, but I think that this is something which happens very often, that you take a look at a series, and Andrea mentioned a series. You see who is published, who is in the committee. And if there's somebody in that committee who you think your advisor or your thesis director is willing to say, take a look at this book, it has that opening. So.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Very good tip.
So, and I was also wondering, I mean, we speaking about the humanities, right? And I think actually all three of the participants now work in religion, right? If I'm not mistaken, more or less. So I was wondering, do other participants have insights from other fields in the humanities, and maybe like where practices differ, or is the experience that basically things are pretty much the same all over humanities? So I'm asking, for instance, because the choice of the press might also depend on the specific field, and practices might differ. So I think Anna Schechtman, like you mentioned before that you're in the process of publishing a book in philosophy, right? Is whatever like was something said here, would you say like that practices differ in your field?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think my experience is it's very field specific. As you know, in our field, books usually come later in the process. I think you have the privilege of establishing yourself a little bit. So when they're publishing articles, it's usually not so common to turn a dissertation into a book, but rather have a later project that's independent or kind of downstream from the dissertation. So by the time of approaching a publisher, usually there's some record that you can lean onto. So I think in my experience and other people that I know, you wouldn't be expected to have a full manuscript, maybe not even a chapter when approaching a publisher with a proposal. I know that I didn't, and it was enough that they could send your proposal to reviewers and who can also know your work otherwise. So I'm not sure how applicable it is, just because philosophy has become less book heavy as a discipline, I think, over the years compared to the rest of the humanities.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. That's so that really is a different practice. But like the point is that you have really already a record of very nice publications, and then given that background, like you say, it's enough just to send out the book proposal without actually supplying a manuscript. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, not always, but in many cases, it's also such a small field of comparison that I think it's easier just to, I think the good max. So that's another maybe point that's worth emphasizing, talking to editors. When I spoke, so I have a contract with Oxford University Press, and when I spoke to the editor there, he just seemed to know everyone. And if not to know everyone, at least to know how the field works. So talking to him, talking to the editors is really useful. They just know the field, and they can be someone, if you can catch them in a conference or when visiting Oxford, for example, find the Oxford University Press editor, or Cambridge, and so on, and talking to them, that could be very, very helpful.
Okay, great, thanks. Any other comments, questions, stories, perspectives you want to share?
Just piggybacking on that I think nothing beats personal contact. So if there's any way of somehow making an appointment and having a conversation with an editor, I think nothing beats that. It's very, very important, very helpful.
I just guess that also probably makes a difference. Coming out freshly out of your PhD, it might be a bit hard to actually get an editor to talk to you, right? I mean, I guess it's pretty hard, for instance, in the case of Oxford University Press. I mean, I don't know like what the procedures are. So there's like, of course, conferences, but I would assume that it's difficult if you're not well established already to actually get an in. But that might relate back to what Richard Cohen said before, that someone else vouching for you might help you to get a foot into the door.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they often go. Mm-hmm. They often go to large conferences, so they, then just get their email and send an email before the conference and see if you can get something, or you walk down to the booth. That's what I did several times. Just walk to the booth of the press. Mm-hmm. Sorry. Yeah, please, Professor Cohn.
No, I was just looking at a book on my table at the moment, and thinking this was a man who thought that his book would be published by a trade publisher. And in the end, the trade publisher was not interested. And the university press was interested. The university press, in that particular case, turned to me and asked me to read the book. The book is now a finalist for the National Jewish Book Award in the United States. And that was clear that it was something which came out of years of work, and therefore he thought maybe a trade publisher would take it. Trade publisher didn't take it, but the university press did wonderful work on the book, and the book is out. So in a sense, there was contact between the author and the publisher who found somebody who was willing to work also with the book and the publisher. And so I come back again to Flavio's notion. The issue of finding a what should I say, contact which would be of interest, and a contract that will help you think about your book is very, very important. And therefore, as I see Peter in front of me at the moment, I think, Peter, who's working on Freemasons, he wants to find somebody who will think that this is an issue that needs to be published, and that there's something in this book which is very interesting. But maybe Peter himself won't be able to convince them. But if his advisor will write a letter to a publisher, that will be an opening. So I come back to that basic position, which I think that's true for all areas. Yeah.
And like in personal relationships, the world is a really big place. And I think that Andrea put it right in saying, send it to many, right? There will be someone interested, generally, right? You can never predict. You don't think so?
I don't want you to be sending it to everybody, and then it's an endless process that way. I don't believe that that's the best way to go, personally, but I think that you should find one or two places that you think may be interested and pursue those directions. Come the refusal, you try again. But
absolutely, yeah, I agree.
To send it out to 10, 15 people, I wouldn't do it. But okay, I wish you all good luck.
Right. So thank you.